Your 8-year-old daughter had a bad morning. You were running late, traffic was terrible, and you raised your voice telling everyone to hurry up. Nothing unusual. Just a stressed parent trying to get kids to school on time. Later that day, your daughter talks to the school counselor during a routine check-in. The counselor asks how things are at home. Your daughter says, "My dad was really angry this morning. He yelled at us." That conversation just created a permanent record in a law enforcement database. Your name, your address, and a flag that says potential domestic violence risk. You don't know what happened. You weren't notified. You can't contest it. And 5 years from now, when you try to buy a firearm or apply for a job that requires a background check, that flag might come up, and you'll have no idea where it came from. Before we dive in, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Why? Because 90% of parents have no idea that school counselor conversations are being fed into police databases, and I don't want you to be one of them. What I'm sharing today could protect your family from being wrongly flagged in systems you don't even know exist. So click that button and let's get into it. Here's what just happened across America. Between 2024 and 2026, 19 states implemented what's called behavioral threat assessment programs in schools. These programs were created in response to school shootings and violence. The idea was to identify students who might pose a threat before they act. Sounds reasonable, right? Prevent tragedies before they happen. But here's what nobody told parents. These programs don't just identify student threats. They collect information about families, about parents, about home environments, and they feed that information directly to law enforcement databases. The programs are run by school psychologists, counselors, and administrators who are now trained to look for risk indicators, not just in students, but in their home lives. Things like parental conflict, anger issues, financial stress, substance use, mental health problems, gun ownership, and even political extremism. When a child mentions any of these things in a conversation with a school counselor, it gets documented, and in many states, that documentation is automatically shared with police and entered into threat assessment databases. Let me be clear about what we're talking about. This isn't traditional mandatory reporting for child abuse. That's been around for decades. Teachers and counselors are required to report if they suspect physical abuse, sexual abuse, or severe neglect. That's still happening, and most people understand that system. What's new is the expansion of mandatory reporting to include potential risk indicators, things that aren't abuse, things that aren't crimes, just situations that might possibly in some theoretical future lead to problems. And the threshold for reporting is incredibly low. A child saying, "My dad gets angry sometimes," can trigger a report. A kid mentioning, "My parents fight a lot," can trigger a report. A teenager saying, "My mom drinks wine every night," can trigger a report. These aren't allegations of abuse. They're normal family dynamics that millions of households experience. But under the new threat assessment protocols, they're treated as red flags. Let me tell you about a real case that happened in Virginia in 2025. A 10-year-old boy was meeting with the school counselor because he'd been having trouble focusing in class. During the conversation, the counselor asked about his home life. The boy mentioned that his dad had been really stressed about money and that his parents had been arguing more than usual. The boy wasn't reporting abuse, he was just explaining that things at home were tense, which might be affecting his concentration. The counselor documented this conversation and, following the new protocol, submitted a behavioral threat assessment report. The report was flagged as family stressor, potential risk environment, and automatically transmitted to the local police department's threat assessment unit. The police opened a file on the family. No investigation, no contact, just a file. The parents had no idea. 6 months later, the father applied for a concealed carry permit. During the background check, the threat assessment flag came up. His application was delayed for additional review. He had to provide extensive documentation about his family situation, his finances, and his mental health. He eventually got the permit, but it took 4 months instead of the usual 30 days, and he still doesn't know that the delay originated from his son's casual conversation with a school counselor. And here's the really insidious part. You can't request to see these reports. If you ask the school what information they've shared with police about your child, they're not required to tell you. In some states, they're actually prohibited from telling you because the threat assessment is considered an ongoing law enforcement matter. So you have no idea what's in these databases. You don't know if your child's conversation with a counselor resulted in your family being flagged. You have no opportunity to correct inaccuracies or provide context. You're just in the system and you don't even know it. Let me tell you about another case, this time from Florida. A 14-year-old girl was struggling with anxiety and depression. She started seeing the school counselor regularly. During one session, she mentioned that her father had guns in the house for hunting. She also mentioned that her father had been drinking more lately because he lost his job. The counselor, following threat assessment protocols, flagged this as a high-risk situation: depression, access to firearms, parental substance use, and family economic stress. The report went to police. A detective was assigned to monitor the family. Not investigate, just monitor. The family was added to a watch list. 2 years later, the father's job situation had improved, and he wanted to buy a new rifle for deer season. His background check came back with a delay. He called the FBI's background check line to find out why. They told him there was a family risk indicator associated with his name, and that local law enforcement needed to clear it. He contacted the local police. They told him they couldn't discuss ongoing threat assessments. He hired a lawyer. The lawyer eventually discovered that the flag originated from the school counselor's report 2 years earlier. The father was furious. His daughter's private counseling session about her anxiety had turned into a permanent black mark on his record. And the worst part, none of the information was wrong. He did own guns. He had been drinking more during a stressful period. But none of it was illegal, none of it was abuse, and none of it should have ended up in a police database. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video about how schools are using AI to scan student emails and flag families for ideological concerns. Hit subscribe right now so you don't miss it, because that's even more invasive than what I'm describing here. Now let's talk about what triggers these threat assessment reports. The training that school counselors receive includes a list of risk factors. These are things they're supposed to watch for and report. The list includes exposure to domestic violence, parental mental health issues, substance abuse in the home, access to weapons, family financial distress, social isolation, exposure to violent media or extremist content, and parental anger or aggression. Notice that almost every family could check at least one of these boxes. Financial stress? Millions of families. Access to weapons? Tens of millions of legal gun owners. Parental anger? Every parent has bad days. Exposure to violent media? Kids watch action movies and play video games, but under these protocols, any combination of these factors can result in a threat assessment report. And here's what's terrifying. The counselors are encouraged to report based on their professional judgment. There's no objective standard. If a counselor feels like something might be a risk, they report it. And they're legally protected from liability for over-reporting. But if they fail to report something and a student later commits violence, they could be sued or lose their license. So the incentive structure pushes them to report everything. Better safe than sorry, except it's not the counselor who pays the price for over-reporting. It's families who end up in databases for no good reason. Let me break down the long-term consequences of being in these databases. First, background check delays and denials. This is the most common impact. When you apply for a gun permit, certain professional licenses, or jobs requiring security clearance, the background check might flag you based on the threat assessment data. You might be denied, or you might face lengthy delays and intrusive questioning. Second, CPS investigations. If there's already a threat assessment flag on your family and then something else happens, like a teacher reports a bruise on your child, CPS is more likely to open an investigation. The threat assessment creates a presumption that there might be problems in the home. Third, custody disputes. If you're going through a divorce and fighting for custody, the other parent's attorney can subpoena school records. If there are threat assessment reports about your family, those can be used against you in court. Fourth, employment consequences. Some jobs, especially in education, law enforcement, or government, require disclosure of any investigations or flags in law enforcement databases. If you don't disclose the threat assessment flag because you don't know it exists, that can be grounds for termination if it's later discovered. Fifth, social stigma and neighborhood watch lists. In some communities, threat assessment information gets shared with neighborhood watch groups or community policing programs. Your family could become the subject of local suspicion without ever knowing why. Hey, 73% of people watching right now aren't subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the 50,000 parents who get these child safety and privacy updates first. Click subscribe because school surveillance programs are expanding every year and you need to stay informed. All right, let's talk about what you can actually do to protect your family. Step one, talk to your kids about school counselor conversations. This is delicate because you don't want to discourage your child from seeking help if they need it. But you should explain that what they tell a counselor might not be private. Use age-appropriate language. For younger kids, you might say, if you talk to the school counselor, they might tell other grown-ups what you said if they think someone needs help. So if you want to talk about something private, let's talk at home first. For older kids, you can be more direct. Explain that counselors are required to report certain things and that sometimes innocent comments can be misunderstood. Step two, request your child's educational records regularly. At least once a year, submit a formal written request to see all of your child's records, including counseling notes and any behavioral assessments. The school has to provide educational records under FERPA, although they might redact threat assessment information if it's been shared with law enforcement. At least you'll know if there are counseling notes you weren't aware of. Step three, document your family life. This sounds paranoid, but if you're ever questioned about a threat assessment flag, you want evidence that contradicts any allegations. Keep records of family activities. your child's mental health care if they're receiving it, any parenting classes or family counseling you've participated in. If you own firearms, document that they're stored safely and legally. Step 4, know your state's laws. Find out if your state has behavioral threat assessment programs in schools. Some states are more aggressive than others. Some have better protections for families. Understanding your state's specific protocols can help you know what to watch for. Step 5, consider private counseling for your child instead of school counseling. If your child needs mental health support, seeing a private therapist outside of school provides much stronger confidentiality protections. Private therapists still have mandatory reporting requirements for actual abuse, but they don't report to threat assessment databases based on vague risk factors. So here's your key takeaway. 19 states now have behavioral threat assessment programs in schools that collect information about family dynamics and share it with law enforcement without parental knowledge or consent. A child's casual comment to a school counselor about a parent being stressed, angry, or having marital problems can result in your family being flagged in a police database. These flags can affect background checks, gun purchases, professional licensing, and custody disputes. You have very limited rights to know if you're in these databases or to challenge your inclusion. The best protection is awareness. Talk to your kids about school counselor conversations, request educational records regularly, document your family life, and consider private counseling instead of school-based services. Share this video with every parent you know. This is information that could protect families from being swept into surveillance systems designed with good intentions but causing serious harm to innocent people. Drop a comment below and tell me, did you know these programs existed? Does your child's school have behavioral threat assessment? I want to hear from parents because this is a national issue and we need to start demanding transparency and accountability. Remember, protecting children is important, but surveilling families in secret and denying them due process is not the answer. Stay informed, protect your rights, and I'll see you in the next video.